Jesus is not God. So John 1 is the go-to place for almost every Trinitarian. If you say, hey, where does it say that Jesus is God in the Bible? They'll be like, John 1:1, there it is right there. Let's actually look at it and see if it actually does teach that. And we're not going to focus on exactly what does John 1 and the entire prologue teach, but we're going to focus on what does it not teach. And I do not think that it teaches that Jesus is God. So, for just a frame of reference, let me read John 1:1 in a standard translation like the ESV. It says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." Now let me read it in the REV. It says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and what God was, the Word was." Now the reason for this difference in translation is actually because of the absence of the article before theos in that last phrase in John 1:1. We're going to talk about that more in a second, but that's just to give you a frame of mind. This is the verse that, most people focus on. So the first reason why this is not teaching that Jesus is God is because in John 1:1b, right there, it says that the Word was with God. So this means that it's something different from God. So it doesn't say that the Word was with the Father. It says that the Word was with God. So even if you think the word there means Jesus, which I think is questionable and up for debate, even if you think that, it's still saying Jesus or the Word was with God. So that means it's something different or someone different from God. So that's the frame of mind that we should be having going into the last phrase. The Word was God. That's actually not a proper translation, but we're going to get to that in a second. Most Trinitarians see the logic flowing like Johnny was with Tom and Johnny was Tom. This actually doesn't make any sense though, and luckily that's not what the Greek is actually saying, but that's how most Trinitarians understand it. They understand it to mean Jesus was with God and Jesus was God. That's just like saying Johnny was with Tom and Johnny was Tom. That doesn't really make any sense at all. He's someone different in the first phrase, and he's the exact same person in the second phrase. So, just right off the bat, the logic just simply doesn't really make sense in most standard translations. So even in John 1:1b here, the Word was with God. God there is the Father. Even most Trinitarians would admit, yes, God there means the Father, because it can't mean the Trinity. You can't say the Word was with the Trinity, because they understand the Word there to be Jesus. So you couldn't say Jesus was with the Trinity. That makes no sense. It's that the Word was with God, the Father. So right before our big verse in question, our big phrase in question, John 1:1c, right before it, Trinitarians admit that God there is the Father. So that's a big reason why we should understand that John 1:1 is not teaching that Jesus is God. So the second reason why Jesus is not God in John 1:1 is because of the absence of the article in that last phrase in John 1:1c. So if you look at the screen, in John 1:1b, it says that the Word was with God, ton theon there, and the article is present. And then in John 1:1c, it says, and the Word was God. This is the ESV. It's theos ein halagos. But before the theos there, if you notice, there is no article. So the article is removed from that last phrase. What does this mean? Well, Philip Harner did a study on this exact Greek syntax, and Daniel Wallace cited it in his Greek grammar. But essentially, it makes the last phrase, the word was God, it makes that qualitative. So it's not that the Word just is God, it's that the Word has the qualities of God, or what God was, the Word was. It's not a direct one-to-one correspondence. So it means that the Word was like God, the Word had the qualities of God, not that the Word just is God. This can also be seen because of the phrase right before. Because again, if we take this to just mean the Word just is God, the Word was God, then that makes no sense with what happened in the phrase right before it, when it says, and the Word was with God. Again, that would be like saying Johnny was with Bob and Johnny was Bob. That just doesn't make sense. So luckily, the Greek isn't actually saying that. So let's talk about, like, even if the article was present in this last phrase, let's say it was ho theos ein halagos, like the word was the God. Let's say that even if that was the case, what would that mean for Trinitarians? How would you actually understand that? If God, if theos means father, then this would be the logic. It would be the word Jesus, according to Trinitarians, equals the Father. That doesn't make any sense. That's modalism, where Jesus is the Father. So that doesn't actually work. So that can't be the meaning of God in John 1:1c. Well, let's say the meaning of God in John 1:1c is the Trinity. Then that would mean the word Jesus equals the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Well, that doesn't make any sense either. Jesus is not the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So some Trinitarian scholars see the problem with that logic, and they then want to translate this verse something like the word was divine. So they're acknowledging that, yeah, when you take out that article, then that changes the meaning. It's not just that the word just is God, but that the word was divine. We can talk about what that means, but that's an admittance that the verse isn't saying that Jesus is God or that the word is God. That's just simply not what the verse is saying. And even if that's what it was saying, that logic just doesn't work. So these scholars even admit that Jesus isn't being called God. It's not that the word just was God. So they admit that there's not a one-to-one correspondence between these two words. The exact same syntax happens in 1 John 4:8. So it's ho theos agape estin. God is love. There is no article before love. So it's not that God just is love. You can't turn that into the equation God equals love or love equals God. But it's that God embodies love, or God has the qualities of love. So that's exactly what's going on here with the Word. It's that the Word has the qualities of God, or the Word embodies God. It's not that the Word just is God. That would be a big mistake to make, to just have a one-to-one correspondence there, and it wouldn't work with the phrase directly before it. That would turn the sentence into Johnny was with Bob and Johnny was Bob. That just doesn't make sense. So all that to say, John 1:1c is not calling Jesus God, because first, Jesus is not in the text, the Word is in the text. Secondly, the article's not before God, so it's not talking about God, it's talking about the quality of God. And thirdly, even if the article was in the last phrase before God, the logic doesn't make any sense within Trinitarianism. So even if the article was there, it actually doesn't make sense. So for those three reasons, John 1:1c is not calling Jesus God. So the third reason why Jesus is not God, even in the prologue and even in John 1, is because in verse 2 it says that the Word was with God. So again, if we had any confusion about is the word God, is the Word the same thing as God from verse 1, he reiterates again in verse 2 that the Word was with God. So it's somebody or something different from God. So that's another reason. The fourth reason, in verse 6, it says that John was sent by God. Was John sent by Jesus? No, John came to bear witness about Jesus. He wasn't sent by Jesus. So again, in verse 6, God is not Jesus. God is the Father. So for all of these reasons, it's pretty clear that even in the prologue, Jesus is not God.